Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I'm your host, Eric Smith, and today I'm talking about Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley from Ballantine Del Rey. Ballantine. This is a retro review, and before I get into the book, a little bit of history. This book was originally published in 1979. Let me double check that. Yes, 1979. So, at the time that this book came out, the only Star Wars material in existence was the original film, Star Wars. The Star Wars Holiday Special, the Marvel comic book, and I believe there was a newspaper strip. Oh, and the sequel novel, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, that may have been the sequel movie if the original Star Wars hadn't made so much money. But we're not going to get into that. So that's all there was as far as source material. The original movie, the holiday special, which George Lucas wishes didn't exist. The Marvel comic, newspaper strip, Splinter of the Mind's Eye. So, to give this book a fair shake, I had to ignore almost 44 years of Star Wars material. All of the movies, all of the comics that came out since then, all of the novels and TV shows and everything that has built upon Star Wars. I had to try to ignore that while reading this. And apparently, the author ignored even all of the stuff that did exist at the time. So, Han Solo at Star's End, it is a prequel story. Takes place before the original movie. And essentially, Han and Chewbacca, the Millennium Falcon, doing their criminal stuff. And they need some stuff done to the Millennium Falcon. And they go to some criminals they know who will, repair it and change the serial number, essentially. The easiest way for me to put it. Do all this stuff, and so, but Han doesn't necessarily have the money to pay for it, so he makes a deal, and he gets involved in all of this. He and Chewie get involved in a bunch of stuff. And so, and what they're fighting against, Han and Chewie, they are fighting against is this authority. Let me see if I can very quickly find out what it's called. Let's see. It should be in these first couple of pages. It says authority, but there's a longer name for it. It's 3 words. All right. Well, I'm not gonna sit here and reread the whole book. Basically, it's a giant corporation. So, right off the bat with this book, it is aside from the fact that the characters are Han Solo and Chewbacca, and they fly in a ship called the Millennium Falcon, there is 1% of this book that places it within the Star Wars universe. Less than 1%. There is no mention of the Empire, no mention of an Emperor, of the Sith, of stormtroopers, nothing. Except, at one point, when somebody wants Han Solo to do something good, or out of the goodness of his heart, he says, I'm not one of those Jedi Knights or Freedom's Sons. That's it. That is the only mention of Jedi Knights. And then a little later in the book, there's something about the Clone Wars. And not even something about the Clone Wars. It just says Clone Wars. Those are the only two references to anything from Star Wars, other than, again, the fact that it's Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the Millennium Falcon. No Tusken Raiders, no Jawas, no TIE Fighters or X-Wings or any of that. Although there is a Z-95 Headhunter, which is a ship that looks exactly like an X-Wing, except with 2 wings instead of 4. So, not exactly like an X-Wing. It looks like an X-Wing, but with 2 wings instead of 4. And I believe that was introduced in this book, but it has since become canon. It was included in a bunch of stuff that has come since this book. So at the time this was written, that wasn't part of the whole Star Wars thing. So it's trying to, again, take it out of the decades of Star Wars that exists. It is a little odd that there's almost no mention of anything that would ground it in the world of Star Wars. It's very much, it could very easily just be any pulp science fiction book from the 70s, late 70s. With a roguish type of hero. But Han Solo is, he is a criminal in this. He's a smuggler. And I think he does some things that George Lucas would not have approved of after the first movie. He does some very, very vicious things in here. So the writing is 70s pulp. It gave me the feeling of the old Star Trek comics from the 70s. Gold Key, I believe, was the publisher. And they would put the word space in front of everything. We need to go to the space planetarium. Use the space fork. And, grab that space rock. Oh, there's a weird space plant. Everything was, it's science fiction. Everything has space in front of it. And while this book doesn't go that far, then the way things were named just sort of had that feeling. Like the author's just giving these things weird science fiction-y names to say, ooh, look at us. We're in this weird, not a future world, because it was a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. There's even a point where it says something, instead of just saying it's going to take us 10 hours, it says, I think they say standard time units. It's going to take us 10 standard time units to do whatever. So that's, depending on how you feel about that, I find that goofy, and I like that goofy bit of pulp science fiction writing. Excuse me just a moment. It's very hot today. It's in the 80s. I have the window open, so there may be some ambient background noise. We'll see. So it's a fun, pulpy science fiction adventure. There's some crazy stuff in it. There's some interesting characters in it. I like some of the people that show up. Han Solo, the character of Han Solo hadn't been completely established at this point. We know he was a smuggler and a rogue. We know he came back at the end of Star Wars. Spoilers for those of you who hadn't seen the original Star Wars movie. He comes back and helps save the day. but we really didn't know that much about him. And this gives us it doesn't give us a lot of background, but it does sort of solidify his character a little bit, which will all be undone with The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and special editions. We're going to get to that in a second, but it does sort of give him a little more character, a little bit more with the relationship between he and Chewbacca, and no mention of Jabba the Hutt, any of that. But it gives us, instead of the Empire, it gives us this. Basically, it's a giant corporation. I wish I could remember the full name of what it is. This giant corporation, apparently at the edge of the galaxy, the outer rim of the outer rim, there are a bunch of planets that for some reason never actually attained. There's no sentient life on these planets, but they're ripe with resources. And so this corporation basically came in, took over all of these worlds, and have set themselves up as kind of a little empire, their own little empire. But they never say that word. They're this authority with their own police force and all their own stuff. And so I don't know if that has ever come back in any Star Wars stories. But it was interesting that they sort of established this mini empire for Han Solo to go up against. And I will say, my favorite part of this entire book comes from, I think Brian Daley may have had precognitive powers. I think he may have been able to see the future. For anyone who has seen Star Wars in its original form, and then the special edition of Star Wars, and then the re-release of the special edition, and then the release of it on Disney Plus, George Lucas liked to make some changes. And there's one change in particular that had fans in an uproar and led to a certain slogan. See, I can't decide if I should say what the slogan is before I tell you what's in the book. Let me just tell you what's in the book. So Han and Chewbacca are with these people. There's this group that is searching for relatives that have disappeared. Disparate people, species, have all had relatives sort of rebel against the authority and then disappear. And so they formed this group. And this is who Han and Chewbacca are helping so that they can then get the Millennium Falcon fixed up, etc. And so Han, Chewbacca, this character Reckon, are in this room doing some stuff. And they've got some droids with them. There's a knock at the door. Han and Chewbacca pull their guns. And Reckon walks over to the door and he says something like, did you ever think to find out who's at the door before you go blasting? And Han Solo says, it's easy for me to find. I don't know if I should read the exact quote. I probably should. Okay, I say relatively easy to find, and then let's see. I know it's one of these pages. Of course, now that I'm looking for it. See, and now that I've said it, Oh, where is it? You guys just look at the top of my freshly shaved head. Okay. Da, 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 da. There it is. All right, that didn't take too long. Of course, I didn't look at the timer. All right, so knock at the door. Reckon says, "Kindly put your weapons up, Captain. That is Torm, one of my group. Even if it weren't, would it not have been wiser to find out what was happening before preparing to shoot?" And here it is, the greatest line ever written in any book. Han made a sour face. "I happen to like to shoot first, Reckon, as opposed to shooting second." Now, this might not mean anything to some of you, but for me, my mind was blown, because the slogan that has been around now for decades is that Han shot first. If there's anybody out there who does not know, in the original Star Wars, Han is at the cantina, Greedo is there to take him back to Jabba the Hutt, and Han just shoots him. In cold blood, essentially. Just straight up shoots Greedo. Then in the special edition, George Lucas changed it so that Greedo shot at Han first and missed, and then Han shot him. And then when it came out on Blu-ray or whatever, it was changed again so that they shot at exactly the same time. Greedo missed. Han killed Greedo. And then for some insane reason, when it was released on Disney Plus, they shoot at the same time. Greedo misses. Han hits Greedo. And for some reason, before he dies, Greedo says, "McClunky." Something like that. And then dies. But anyway, in the original, the absolute first time it was ever in theaters, Greedo never shot at Han Solo. I'm a purist. I think Han shot. It's not even a matter of Han shooting first. Han's the only one that shot. But anyway. But of course, once Han became popular and became a hero, we couldn't have him be a murderer. And so George Lucas changed it. But anyway, the fact that in this book, where this author had no idea what the future was holding, what the future had coming up, and he writes Han Solo saying, "I happen to like to shoot first." I thought that was fantastic. But anyway, I feel I've been rambling. I could talk about Star Wars for days, weeks, months. So, in the end, I gave this a 3 out of 5. It's very good pulp science fiction. And if I ignore everything that came post 1979, it's a decent Han Solo story. But it's not great science fiction. It's good pulp science fiction. So 3 out of 5. I liked it. I can't say I really liked it, and it certainly didn't blow me away, but I was entertained. There are 2 more books in this series. I have those. And this is the first time I've ever read this. I had this back when it came out, and I never got around to reading it. So this is the first time I've read this. I have not read the other 2, which are also by Brian Daley. There's also a Lando Calrissian series from around the same time. I have those. I've never read those yet. But I was just in the mood for some retro reading. So Han Solo at Star's End, in the end, if you're a Star Wars fan and you can ignore everything that came after this, that basically contradicts, actually I don't know that it actually contradicts anything. This might contradict stuff that came after. I don't know, because I haven't read everything that came after. But if you can just look at it as what it is, a book from 1979 with characters that didn't have huge backstory, huge future story, Just a couple of popular characters, essentially, they wanted to make money off of. Um, it's not a bad read, and it does have the greatest line in all of literature. So 3 out of 5 stars for Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley. That's mine. Those are my thoughts. Very rambly thoughts. Question for this video is, I guess, I don't know if we've ever really talked about this. Who out there is a big Star Wars fan? And what is your favorite era of Star Wars fiction? If that makes sense. Now, I don't want to, please, I would rather not get into it about how Disney has ruined Star Wars and how all of the stuff that is now called Legends should be the real Star Wars. People are allowed to have their head canon, but that doesn't make it the real canon. You're allowed to like what you like, but we're not here on my channel to tear things down. Excuse me. But, so if we can all be nice, play nicely together, what is your favorite era of Star Wars story, I guess? And you can either go, well, I mean, you can do what you want within the parameters that I've already set up, please. But do you like Old Republic stuff? Do you like what is it, High Republic, the new stuff? I have not read any of this new, I think it's High Republic stuff. I mean, being my age, what I grew up with, I like the old stuff. The first movie is my favorite Star Wars movie. I grew up buying I gesture like you can see that I have the Star Wars Epic collections of the original Marvel Comics. That's what I grew up with. I liked what they were doing there. It was all just wild and crazy stuff, and it was a open frontier. But that being said, my favorite Star Wars character is Dr. Aphra. I love Dr. Aphra. I want a Dr. Aphra TV show. She's a great character. Or would it be they are a great character? Plus, in the first Dr. Aphra series, they had those psychotic robots, androids, droids, and Black Kershik. Yeah, love Dr. Aphra, but I've got that nostalgic feel for this stuff from the 70s and the 80s. The Legends stuff, for me, has always been hit and miss. I actually enjoy, I've mentioned this before in my Reading Remembrances videos, that I tend to like the books that don't focus so heavily on the main characters, because I felt, at least at the time, the authors could do anything. You never knew who was going to live or die. There was the two book MedStar series or whatever it was. It was kind of like MASH in the Star Wars universe, a medical unit on this planet in the middle of the war. I enjoyed those. I like the Rogue Squadron books. I thought I would like the Jedi Private Detective books, but it turned out they weren't. And it might be they were okay for what they were, but they weren't Jedi Private Detective books. Come on, that's not what they were. I like the horror stuff. Unfortunately, there's only been a couple of those. So, but yeah, the old stuff. I love reading something like Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Sort of this what if multiverse kind of Star Wars fiction before things were starting to be set in stone. So even though, it's with better writing, I mean, this is serviceable writing. As I said, it's fine pulp science fiction writing, but I like this kind of thing where, we don't have all the baggage. Does my answer make any type of sense? Um, I'll say I really dislike the prequels. I think they're horrible. I think the acting is horrible. I think they're riddled with plot holes, and I know the original trilogy has plot holes, but that was flying by the seat of their pants, essentially. So I cut them a little slack. By the time they got to the prequels, they should have had that shit figured out. Can't stand the prequels. I don't hate the sequels, the new three. I love Rogue Squadron. I didn't think Solo was horrible, but it's probably the weakest one other than the prequels. TV shows I haven't kept up on. I watched the first couple seasons of Mandalorian and I liked those, but I haven't watched anything else. I really want to see Andor. And I have not read all of the comics. There's just way too much. I don't have the time or the money. I keep up with Dr. Aphra, or try to. At least I get the books. And I did like the Samurai Star Wars. I watched the episode that was on the TV on Disney Plus, and there's a novel that I read. I really liked that. I'd love to see more of that sort of feudal Japan samurai version of Star Wars. That was really cool. All right, but what about you? What, without everybody going nuts, please, what is your favorite era of Star Wars? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K. ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I have. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.